Well, hello, my friend. One more time. Here we are having a heart to heart. And I love, we had a nice little pre-chat because there's always so much going on in life, right?
No kidding. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's sunny. I'm in Seattle right now, and it is sunny, blue skies, and a sunny, blue sky, warming day. And it's supposed to go up to 80 degrees. And of course, that's Fahrenheit. But so yesterday it was 15 degrees. We'll translate
Okay.
that. Yesterday it was
It's
15 degrees, and it's beautiful. It's spring. Spring has sprung.
well, for you, you mean, yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Because
I'm sorry.
yeah, thank you very much. Because here's the thing, I love Mother Nature. I accept her in all her moods. Here's the thing. Yesterday I was spreading some nice compost, and there was sleet and snow and rain, and I had my big mitts on and my toque, and I'm thinking, I'm ready to put my toque away. It's almost May, so I'll just, live vicariously through you right now and know that.
Well, and I think there's something to that. There's a reason I'm moving from the Rocky Mountains in Calgary and Radium Hot Springs, where I've been for the last 10 years. There's a
Yeah,
reason why I'm moving from there to Vancouver Island.
right.
And there is something about this earlier spring that lives in my soul right now
Oh,
that I need. Yeah. So
um,
maybe you'll join me on the island sometime.
yes. Well, and that's one of our goals is to, because, I refuse to say, oh, I can't stand these long winters and everything. We're going to do something about it. And we're going to spend some of our time in the winter somewhere else. Right. As opposed to, but until then, I'm just like, can you just, Mother Nature, can you just stop now? I'm done with my mitts,
Yeah.
so anyways, that's all good. And I'm glad you're enjoying spring. And yeah, we were chatting about, I just went to this volleyball tournament, Tanner's last volleyball tournament, grief and joy because it's over. And I was laughing at myself because I had a big grief sobbing about things. And, it's just bringing heart, humor, and humanness to all of this is the greatest thing we can do, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Laugh at
Absolutely.
ourselves, laugh at Mother Nature, whatever. Yes.
Yeah, and that humanness, right? To bring heart, absolutely, and to bring humor, we got to, because if we didn't laugh, we'd cry. That's the phrase I hear most
Yes.
often.
Yes.
But the reality is to bring the humanness, to be okay with the vulnerability of it. That's everything.
It
This is where I
is.
am right now, and I don't need to don't worry, be happy on this. What I need to do is I need to be willing to move through this because we think we're going to get stuck in it, right? We think that
Yes.
so we're not going to go there because
Mm,
if I go there and I start crying, my mother used to say, if I start crying, I'll never
I'm not.
stop.
You know what? That is just, remember, I was just sharing when we talk about there are many chapters, there will be many chapters in your life. Do not get stuck in the one you're in. Sometimes it's a great thing and sometimes it's grief. I promise you, it will not be forever.
Right.
Right? If you so choose to do your work and allow the heart, humor, humanness, gratitude, and love in.
Yes.
That's the caveat, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. If you allow yourself to move through the emotions that you have, because that is the humanness. The humanness is we are going to have this wide array of
Yeah.
emotions. And in grief, they're going to be chaotic. They're not going to be linear. They're not going to make sense. Can we just be okay with that? And I think for most people, when we normalize it, when we say this is part of the grief journey, is that it is this chaotic, it is 1 minute I'm laughing, 1 minute I'm crying. Um, and if we're willing to be with the laughter when the laughter's happening and not
Yes.
just that for, well, I shouldn't be laughing right now, because we do that to ourselves as much as we
Oh,
do, no, I'm tired of my tears, I don't want to cry anymore.
yeah.
Um, Instead of recognizing, well, if we just let it wash through us and we don't latch onto it and we don't make it our identity, we don't cling to it, we
Mm.
actually allow it to flow through us and we
Mm.
get curious about what's on the other side. There is always another side that we get to.
Absolutely. And I do believe with all my heart. So, first of all, every time I say this to people, how do we get good at anything? We practice.
Yeah.
we
That's
learn,
That's
right? And we have mentors, and yeah, when it comes to grief, mourning, bereavement, death, and all of these things, we just push it away, and we're creating our own suffering in that. That's the elephant in the room. We're creating excessive suffering in that, and it doesn't have to be this way. Be compassionate with yourself. Why would we know what to do with this?
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. Because we've
Absolutely.
never been taught, right?
And
As
the
I was
people that were trying to teach us, they didn't know either. So they're just like, hey, let's not talk about that, or let's not, don't bring up so and so because that means you're still sad. And it's like, well, no, I just want to keep talking about this person forever.
and I love that means you're still sad. Well, first of all, maybe I am still sad, and that's okay. I get to be. And maybe it's not sad, but maybe you're triggered into thinking it's sad because you're holding sadness inside of you.
Mm,
So, there's that saying, when you point a finger, there are three fingers pointing back at you. And
right.
and when we're grieving, we maybe need to remember that more often than not, that if somebody is saying something to you about your grief, all they're really doing is they're letting you know where their grief is, right?
Oh, and it's so triggering for people, isn't it? When they see someone grieving, I mean, it's like they remember their pain that they don't want to feel, and it's,
Yeah. Well, so we live in a society of buried and carried grief, right?
yes, yeah.
And in the society of buried and carried grief, and I do want to say to all of the people who are part of the caring professions around grief and bereavement, um, I've had a lot of people who say to me, well, I had grief, but I'm done with that.
That's adorable.
Yeah, that's adorable.
So
I'm
cute.
glad that's how you experience it. But here's the thing. For those of us who live in North America, for those of us who live in the Western world, to be quite honest, and I say that because there are other cultures that handle this so much better than we do. In the Western
Absolutely.
world, we have taught ourselves, and we've been taught by generations before who, again, they were dealing with their own stuff. They didn't necessarily know how to deal with this. They
Mm,
did the best they could. Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. So there's no blame, shame, or guilt here.
yeah.
The reality, though, is that we live in a society that rewards buried and carried grief. And we are
Ooh,
taught to bury and carry our
yes.
grief. So, what I said in the talk I gave on Monday is, for all of you who are coming to this with an altruistic, I want to create compassionate grief communities. So, I want to do it, I want to help, and I want to be. My message to them was, you do, you help, you be, first and foremost by addressing your own buried and carried grief. And if you are sitting there saying, well, I don't have buried and carried grief, and your hands are going up against that idea, that's where your buried and carried grief lives. Because it's your level of resistance to it that ensures that you can't be safe for somebody who's grieving, because, as you said, their grief is going to trigger your
Mm.
buried and carried grief. Because
Oh,
that buried and carried grief is, as Dr. Wofeld says, it's a waiting welcome.
it is a waiting welcome.
So somebody else's tears is the welcome. If I'm going to slow down to the pace of your grief,
Mm.
then what I've done is I've let my own grief know it's safe for you to bubble up. And so the person who's grieving is a real threat to the person who's got buried and carried grief. And for those of us who know we've got buried and carried grief, and it's like, and I'm going to walk with you. And if something comes up for me, I'm going to honor that, and I'm going to be there because I'm not afraid of my buried and carried
Mm.
grief. Then I can really walk with you and not make it about me. I can be with you and then go deal with my own stuff when I need to and how I need to. But for somebody who denies that they have buried and carried grief, that's a monster under the bed, right?
It's the monster under the bed. And it's so, there's so much to unpack there, because when you say we reward it, like, we don't want people to talk about that stuff. And, again, we're very compassionate and loving, and we want to help everyone else. It's like, well, I don't want to deal with my own issues. I'm here to help everyone else, because we reward the giver. We reward the person who puts themselves last and isn't thinking about themselves. And if only we could give and receive and understand that you have buried and carried grief, I do. And like, we can create space for all of it. Now when someone is there and their husband just died, it's not really time for you to be on the floor crying because of your dog died 17 years ago. However, to create that space emotionally to say, oh, wow, I didn't really deal with that, right? And to honor there's no comparison. That's the other thing, like, let's not compare. And I think a really important piece, and we've touched on this before, but it's hard for people to be able to say it's okay to acknowledge your buried and carried grief. It's okay to grieve and then have joy in your life again, and laughter and all the goodness. Staying stuck in your grief forever does not equal how much you loved the person who died, right? Like, there's just so much in there. And if we can increase our capacity for allowing all of our emotions.
Well, I think
A mixed bag.
The compassionate piece around staying stuck in my grief doesn't mean that I'm keeping them alive, doesn't mean that I'm honoring our love. It's such a misconception, and it's born of the myth that we need to bring closure and we need to say goodbye. It's because of that we need to bring closure, we need to say goodbye, that people now misunderstand the grief journey is about closure and saying goodbye. Right. And so what naturally happens is the part of us that knows that that's not what I'm supposed to do.
I don't want to say goodbye.
Right. So if you are telling me that's what grief is requiring of me, then I'm going to stay stuck in my grief, because that's not
I don't want closure. I want to stay connected.
Right. But it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the grief journey is, because of this misunderstanding that grief requires you to say goodbye and bring closure. If instead we reframe that and we say, what grief is asking me to do is to find where the relationship is now. So what I'm saying goodbye to, and it will take time, is I'm saying goodbye to my loved one in physical form.
Yes.
And I'm finding where they are now, how I am connected to them, how I will connect with them. And the really sad part for me about people who say, well, I'm going to be grieving for the rest of my life, I'm going to miss them for the rest of my life, is that they're not open to the possibility that I could find where the relationship is now, because that ended my loved one's life. It did not end our relationship. So I'm the one who's now creating stuckness in the relationship by choosing to stay, as you said, in this chapter.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I saw a video. You have to Google it. Billy Bob Thornton, the actor.
Yes.
Used to be married to Angelina Jolie. It's completely irrelevant. There was a video and it just popped up on my feed, and he was talking about the fact that his brother died, and he knows that he will be sad forever and he will grieve forever, and that is okay. And it was just this, it made my heart ache to hear him. And I thought, he needs to talk to Maria. I need him to talk to you. Because I could just, he was just in pain. And I don't know how long, but in his mind, he's like, it's okay. I'm going to be sad forever. I'm going to be in grief forever. And, we honor that. We say, wow, you loved your brother so much that you are willing to stay in your grief forever. Wow.
Yes.
That's a concern.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're all going to have people that we love die. So we're just going to be a whole bunch of grieving people with no.
Well, and we are.
And we are.
We're either bearing and carrying our grief, or we're holding our grief as a flag of loyalty and
loyalty. Yes.
Yeah. And it's misplaced loyalty, because what it's done is it's actually locked our loved one in this memory of death place. My mother was the queen of buried and carried grief around her brother. Her brother died in his 40s, and she never got over it, and she could never speak about him. And when we bury and carry grief symptoms harden over time. So the sadness she was feeling, now whenever his name came up, her whole body would start shaking with it, and her voice would crack, and it became harder and harder every single time. And so I say to everybody who will listen that the book that I wrote was a love letter to my mother. 52 Ways to Convert Your Grief to Mourning was Mom. please, this is what I would have wanted for you, and this is what I did when I was grieving you, because I really needed to convert that grief to mourning.
What a beautiful way to honor your mother, right? And it's like, thank you, Mom, for those lessons. Thank you
Yes.
for teaching me, right? Thank you for teaching me. I just need you to go back because you said something so critical. Grief symptoms harden over time.
When they're not converted to mourning.
When they are not, can you please elaborate on that
Yeah.
juicy nugget?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so grief, wherever grief is, wherever it's showing up, whether it's in physical symptoms, mental symptoms, emotional symptoms, wherever it's showing up, if I shut down on that, if I keep it internal, because grief is the internal response to loss, if I keep that inside of me, it's going to churn and churn and churn inside of me, and it gets stuck there. So if the emotion, and we all know people who have done this, if the emotion that's coming up is anger, I'm really angry that my beloved was taken from me and I can't get over this anger and the injustice of it, and I start cycling that anger, I start to become an angry person, whereas I never was an angry person before. All that's really happening there is the grief symptom is hardening over time, and over extended time, over decades. What then starts to happen is we start to lose our life spark. The joy of life becomes really dim, and it becomes really small as well. The way to work through that is to convert the grief to mourning, because mourning is the external expression, which is why my company is Healthy Mourning, because it's all about a commitment to converting the grief to mourning, and to allow the grief to surface and to be expressed out and to inform us, because we find where the relationship is with our loved one as we allow ourselves to mourn. Grief isn't going to get us the relationship. What's going to get us to finding where the relationship is when we convert the grief to mourning, because it's in the things that we do to do that that help us to find where that relationship is.
Oh my goodness. Everything you're saying, I'm hanging on it, because as you're speaking, all these pictures of people I know are popping up, right? And it hurts. It's so sad because, again, as you teach this so beautifully and guide people, and you teach by example, right? That is the greatest thing we can do. When people want this person to do that and that person, teach by example. And I just, again, think of how my mission of people becoming proactive, talk about plan and prepare before. Imagine if people understood this.
Yes.
Imagine if people understood this and say, oh my goodness, I don't have to stay stuck in darkness my whole life to show how much I loved Joe or Jane or whoever. Oh, a lovely couple, Jane and Joe. Anyway, and to just think of, people understanding that. See, the greatest way, in my opinion, that you could honor someone's memory is to talk about them and talk about their wonderfulness and take all that love and spread it around and say, I love this person with all my heart and soul. I miss them physically. I believe we have a spiritual connection, and I'm going to go live the heck out of my life now. Take them with me,
Yeah.
and we can do that.
Yes. And if they're not ready to talk about their loved one, okay, you're not ready. That's fine. It's a journey, and the expert on the journey is the person who's grieving.
Absolutely.
So this idea of that I can say to you. So in the example that you gave, where he's so grieving his brother that he just can't even imagine a time when he won't grieve his brother. Okay. Can I be with you in that? Can I sit with you in that? I don't need to correct your thinking about this. What I need to do is I need to provide a safe environment where you can meet your grief right where it is at this moment in time. So when I talk about creating compassionate grief communities, I'm talking about not a bunch of people who know what grief is and who know what grief isn't and can educate each other on it. What I'm talking about is a community that can say, you're the expert on your grief. And if this is what you're saying to me right now, okay, there is another way. And I'm just going to meet you right where you are. Because wherever you are, that's right and perfect. Because that then creates the possibility that they will hear what's true for them. As I create a space where what you're hearing is true for you, then I'm also creating the space where this individual doesn't have to fight against grief, and they can begin to realize I can lighten my grasp on this a little bit, because I've given them a place where they can mourn. So again, here's the thing. If mourning is the key, right, to soften the symptoms, and it softens over time, just as it hardens over time if you don't mourn. As you mourn, it softens over time. So it's not a one and done. I'm not going to cry once, mourn it out of my body, and then I'll be done. But I will feel better for this tear jag. I'll feel a little lighter for a little bit, because grief is very kind that way. If I meet the grief symptom and I move through the grief symptom, and I speak about doing it with ease and grace, if I greet it with ease and grace, not that it's easy to feel the pain, but I can bring ease and grace to this pain point in my life, then I move through the pain and I can see another possibility. And it's not that somebody else has told me what's on the other side of that. It's that I've discovered it for myself, because somebody's provided a safe space where I could cry the tears I needed to cry, where I could
don't know how to do that. People
No,
don't
we
know
don't.
how
We
to
don't
do
know how to do
that.
that.
And
No.
it's so sad, because again, as people's, I'm visualizing a few people, and this one woman in specific, she's so stuck in her grief and her anger because her son died. And I'm sure, people are like, oh God, I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to hear about this. And I'm sure that's what the resistance she has met, because it's hard. Like, again, there's the elephant in the room to hear that anger. And yet the more people shut her down, the more it's hardening.
Yeah. As opposed to actually validating that and going,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that's hard. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Tell me more. What? Everyone else wants me to be quiet. Yeah. And it's, again, we were all so compassionate. I think when we were chatting earlier, you had mentioned when you were doing the presentation, and there's people that, oh, my siblings need to hear this, and we want to fix everyone, and we want everyone to have, right? We want to, and really the best we can do is teach by example, and say, I listened to this great presenter, and she's going to do another webinar, and I found it really helpful. Right? Is that like, instead of trying to drag people out of their own grief?
Absolutely. Well, and part of it is also, when I hear somebody saying my siblings really need to hear this, what that's telling me also is that siblings are grieving in different ways. Not unusual. Everybody reacts to a lot of completely different ways, and grief is unique. So everybody's going to do it in a different way. And a death is a bomb in a family. It's a BOMB, not a BALM. But what we're looking for from family is, could you be a bomb to this pain? Could you be a BALM to the pain I'm feeling right now? And we expect them, well, this will bring us closer, and we'll be able to go through this together. Not true. For most families, because we're experiencing it in different ways, some people.
It's a really important point, isn't it?
Yeah, some people will want to shut it down and not talk about mom or dad. Other people, we need to talk about this. Let's come together. Well, I'm not ready to talk about it. Well, I'm not ready to talk about it either. But, can we at least sit together and be quiet together? Well, no, I can't sit down right now.
Right.
Both completely valid.
That's huge, right? Because of course, in the movies also often, people all gather and they're comforting each other, and everyone's sort of grieving the same way. Everyone's crying or this and that. And that just might not be the way it is.
No, that's not usually the way it happens.
No, and that is a really, really critical, important point, is in that family, wouldn't it be wonderful if some could connect and gather, and if someone, I've heard people say, you should be here, right here for dad, mom, whatever. And they're like, I just need to get out of here.
I can't be. Yeah.
I can't be, right? I just can't. And we want to explain why, and right. And I just can't right now.
Yeah. And a compassionate grief community recognizes all as valid and allows, okay, you can't be there. I need to be with the people who can be with me. We'll address this later down the pike. And for right now, right now my grief is saying something to me and I need to honor what my grief is saying. But that requires that we, first of all, can hear our grief and that we trust our grief. Because
Mm,
the grief knows its way through. The
mm,
grief, there's wisdom in the grief, right?
mm.
There's wisdom in the knee that's hurting. This is direct out of when my mother died, my knees started hurting. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, right?
Mhm.
My knees, both of them, same time, excruciating pain. And I went to the doctor, and I, who had been studying this, rolling my eyes, thinking, and this on top of everything else, which was my clue that
Right.
this on top of everything else, hang on a second, this only started with this. So this may be my grief. And I went to my doctor, and my doctor, did the MRI and said, well, you've got some arthritis there. So yeah, that's what's really causing it. And yeah, you may not be able to bend that knee the way you used to. And I just kind of looked at him and went, I appreciate that that's your point of view on this. I'm
You're
going to ask.
wrong.
No, no, I didn't say you were
Okay.
wrong. What I said was, what I would really appreciate is, could you write me a referral to a physiotherapist? And then I went searching for a physiotherapist who was willing to hear me say, we know there's arthritis in the knee, but I also know there's grief in the knee. And
Mm,
if you are willing to do what you need to do to help me loosen this up, but part of that will mean you will need to be able to sit with my tears, because as it loosens up, tears are going to
I'm
flow.
gonna cry
So
my eyes out.
yeah, so I need to know that when I'm crying on your
Yeah,
table, you're good with it. You're not going to try and shut me down. So I had to really vet
love
the person
it.
who's going to partner me in this. 6 weeks later, I went to the doctor and I held my ankles up to my butt on both sides.
There you go. Said, P.S. I
Right?
released the grief. It
Yeah.
converted to mourning.
Yeah, yeah. Now I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's going to happen for everybody, but I am saying that when you meet the grief where it's at and you allow it to flow through you, miracles do happen. Shift, transformation happens, because grief is a transformative journey, and it's a
Yeah.
journey. It was never meant to be a place that you stay stuck. Grief is a life process, just like death is a life process.
Wow. It's just so, so important. And to, again, I imagine understanding if we, oh yeah, so grief shows up in different ways in my body, mentally, physically, emotionally. And with each situation, it could be different. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm just gonna sit right now. What is happening? Because I'm feeling off, weird, foggy, angry. Ah, there it is, grief. And I know, again, I think I shared this in my book when I was grieving, leaving nursing, even though it was a wonderful, intentional transition, I still had to grieve a 27-year nursing career and I had such chest pain that I thought I'm either like struggling with this or I'm having a heart attack. So I took a couple aspirin just in case. And when I'm grieving, I feel it in my chest. It's like, right, okay, yeah. And I need to sit with this and I need to just, love on myself, let the tears flow, whatever I need. And to not actually make that connection, just like your knees, to not make that connection would have been like, I have a heart condition.
Yeah, well, that's just it. That's just it. And what's really interesting to me is, though each death is unique, each person is also unique. So when recently I had a loss, and this was somebody who was like a second mother to me,
Mm.
and 3 months after her death, I started really hitting hard up against some symptoms. I was lying in bed and I went, oh, hang on, Anita died 3 months ago. Oh, hello, grief, my old friend. Because I had recognized it and identified it in an earlier loss.
Mm.
Now it wasn't, oh gosh, this on top of everything else. It was, oh, right, that's what this is. I need to slow down
Slow
the
down.
pace of what's happening right now. I need to bring complete awareness and presence to what's happening right now.
And as you're saying that, I think of how we all, when someone is grieving, and again, out of caring, loving, we want to distract them. We want them to be busy. We want them to be, and to to be able to understand how imperative it is to just slow down and
Yeah.
allow those, we don't need excessive distraction and busyness,
Right.
right? Because your grief isn't, it's like people think they're going to distract themselves out of it. It doesn't work that way.
No, it really
Wouldn't it be
doesn't.
great? And the other piece is when you are, and I've done the same thing, like we have these conversations. I am proactive. I understand and all this. That doesn't mean we don't grieve.
No,
We still struggle. And sometimes we don't even
good, yeah.
remember. It's like, how did I not see this? What? This is a human experience that we don't get the, get out of grief card free, because we experience it, and it is uncomfortable and it is not fun, and it is hard. And I understand what I hold on to through it all is like, this is temporary. How hard this is hitting me right now is temporary. And I breathe through it. And I mean, I have no problem mourning. I'm mourning all over the place. I am crying. I don't care if I'm in the grocery store. I am not holding my grief in.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all just say, this person's struggling. Oh, they're having a hard time. Let's create some space for them and just.
Yeah, that's just it. That's just it. And to
Oh,
create that safe environment, I had a lovely compliment following the talk on Monday, where somebody had sent a note saying, "You're just always so vulnerable. You're so willing to be vulnerable." And I thought to myself, I think that is the strength. No, we don't get the get out of grief free card, but what we do get is a recognition that vulnerability and allowing ourselves to go to that place and cry if we need to cry and do whatever we need to do, that this is the best way that we can support ourselves, and without even knowing it, support others, because we mentor by doing, as you
teach
said
by
before,
example.
right?
And that's,
It's,
yes,
it's by example. We are mentoring and we are living, we are walking our talk. This isn't about giving advice and then doing something different.
that's
This
right.
is about doing it and living it, and living the
Absolutely.
joy, and recognizing that there's even joy. I think it was Saint Francis of Assisi who talked about, joy is not happiness. Joy is about bringing yourself to any given moment and being in that moment. So I can have a joyful pain experience because I'm bringing myself to the pain and I'm moving through it.
You're
I'm
moving
not
through it,
getting on
not
it.
parking in the
I'm
green
not
spot.
parking. I'm
You're not
not. I'm
parking there. Not
pitching a
meant to
tent.
park there.
Yeah, I'm not pitching a tent in this particular spot.
No. And that
I
to me is, one of your greatest superpowers, that oh, more than okay to be vulnerable and say, I am not here to tell you how to avoid this. I'm not here. I'm going to teach by my own example. And I have struggled with many things, and I know I will struggle again. And I have thank goodness, I thrown out the window being strong for everyone, being blah, blah, blah. No, I am vulnerable, and sometimes I'm falling apart. And in that moment, I just need to be me. I'm not going to be strong for everyone else, and if we're all grieving together, let's just all have a great big cry. And and it's so wonderful to allow, right, all of that. All these conversations are so great, my friend, honestly.
Oh, for me too. I
I
love
just
them.
love them so much. And again, after we say goodbye, I just like think of these, like grief symptoms hardening over years, and just to help people recognize that, like, even if this has happened to you, if you that buried and carried grief doesn't have to stay there forever, because it is never too late, right, to
Yeah,
convert your
it's
grief to
never too
mourning and
late.
go back. And
Never,
so,
it's never
right,
too late to do catch up mourning. It's called
that's
catch up
right,
mourning, but it's
catch
the
up
exact
mourning.
same thing. Because again, I think Dr. Wolfeld speaks about this the most eloquently. I just love the way he says, grief awaits welcome, it does not await time. So time isn't going to heal the wound of grief.
No.
But the hope in this is that if grief awaits welcome, and I say to myself, I have been hurting hard with this, and I have been in lockdown around this. And so my choice is, I want to hear you. And I can just put my hand on my heart and I can say, I'm creating welcome. I want to hear what you have to say. Believe me, it's going to come. And the fear is that it's going to come and it's going to wipe me out and I'll never stop crying. That's the place where my mother came with, you know, if I
Right.
stop crying, I'll never stop crying.
Gotta
Because
hold it in.
she knew how buried it was and how painful it was. She knew.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm going to say is, when you have your wellness team, when you vet your wellness team the way I did with the physiotherapist, when
Yeah.
you have the people around you who you can trust with this, it can happen with a remarkable amount of ease and grace beyond what is imaginable. And then you step into the life that you were meant to lead, the joy-filled, the truly joy-filled life that you were meant to lead. And you do it
Beautiful.
with your loved one, because you reclaim that relationship. You find where that relationship is now.
See, all of these conversations, it's not doom and gloom. It's very hopeful, light. It's wonderful to have these conversations, right? So we have two choices. We can evolve or repeat. And I choose to evolve, to learn, unlearn, and evolve continuously. And I love having you as my wonderful guide and friend. And it's just, yeah, it's beautiful. It is beautiful. And that's what, again, having these conversations throughout life. It's like, when should we talk about this? Before, during, and always.
That's right. Before, during,
Just those
and
3 times.
always. And I would say always, in all ways.
Yes.
In
Yes.
any way that feels true for you, that feels authentic for you, that feels genuine for you, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's how we're going to create compassionate grief communities, is by creating safe spaces for one another to speak about it in any way. There's no wrong way to do it.
Love it.
Not
And
doing it.
we every single human can be a part of that beautiful compassionate grief community.
That's right.
So, oh, my friend, let's keep chatting next week, because it's all just too good. And
Yes, please.
thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your message. And yes, let's just keep on keeping on, because it's one conversation at a time, one act of kindness at a time, that this is what changes things, right? This is how we
Oh,
change.
so true. So
Yeah.
true. I value this time with you, and I just so look
too.
forward to it every week.
Me too. Me too.
Much
So
love to you. Mwah.
namaste. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Namaste.